This lecture is dedicated to the cinema of the 1980s. From 1982, after martial law, to 1989 and the events of June that brought Poland full independence. This was one of the most dismal periods in our history, the last years of communism. Cinema was hit particularly hard because this period put a stop to the natural process of growth in the fantastic preceding period. If we take into account the number of cancelled projects, or projects that had been started in 1981 but were then shelved and had to wait years to be released, if we take into account the number of projects that were never greenlit, we see the full extent of this loss. This was also a time when many filmmakers left the country. For example, Agnieszka Holland, one of the key filmmakers of the cinema of moral anxiety, went to Paris right before December 1981 and stayed there. Other filmmakers like Andrzej Wajda or Krzysztof Zanussi took advantage of the opportunity to produce their more important projects abroad. Fantastic, talented cinematographers emigrated to America. Years later, we would finally learn their names as Hollywood big shots, such as Janusz Kaminski. If we also add many filmmakers who were used to the art of creating and then decided that it's not right to do anything when coerced and limited their activity to lecturing at film school, an example of which is Wojciech Marczewski, this thwarted his career, which had been booming in the late 70s and early 80s. If we add the discouragement of the audience, who realized that while cinema may have played its part, it certainly did not win, it ended up with the rest of us losers. And those whose hopes and arguments for a political resolution of the conflict ultimately perished. People were discouraged from going to the cinema. This was rather common. I often hear friends say, back in 1978, 1980, I'd go to the cinema twice a week. I would watch everything. Then I no longer felt like it. I never go anymore. Trouble with curfew, the fact that people weren't allowed to go out at night, resulted in a change of habits that proved irreversible. Then a new audience emerged, and new films were being imported for this audience. Films that would not have been released in the early days of communist Poland, such as Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, with all due respect. Bruce Lee's many imitators never matched his talent. In other words, the whole landscape of cinema changed. Cinema lost its momentum, which is not to say that there were no noteworthy accomplishments. In fact, as we will see, some of these accomplishments were remarkable. First, we should mention the continuing of the great tradition of the Solidarity period. I previously mentioned the appearance of the first films about Stalinism. These films could only be finished and released in the second half of the 1980s. The two major accomplishments among these films were Janusz Zaorski's Matka Królów, The Mother of Kings, an adaptation of a 1956 novel by Kazimierz Brandys, published under the same title, for which Zaorski developed a great film form in a story that runs over 20 years or so in black and white. From the mid-1930s, when the plot begins with the sudden death of the main protagonist's husband, named Król, or King, hence the title, which already in Brandis's work had a double meaning, suggesting the real-life character from the Jagiellonian times, while in fact being about a working-class family which should be the salt of the earth in a communist country. And yet the film proved that nothing truly changed in the life of the title character, played by Magda Teresa Wójcik. The hardships of dealing with everyday life in the 1920s and 30s, then the war days, continued in Poland under Stalinism. The film's finale, a trick often used in those days, was documentary footage of a crowd listening to Gomułka's speech in 1956. Except that in this case, this finale did not carry the usual optimistic hopes for a better future. An even more radical story, set in Stalinist times, was a film based on an original screenplay, which incidentally had also been published in book form by the underground press. Ryszard Bugajski's Przesłuchanie, Interrogation. The first portrayal of torture on a victim of the secret police and its officers. But what is more important, it was the victim who proved to be the winner, through her determination and pure courage. The protagonist, played by Krystyna Janda, had a moral victory over the secret police establishment.
Imię.
Antonina.
Nazwisko.
Dziwisz.
Imię ojca.
Antonina.
Imię ojca.
Dziwisz.
Data urodzenia. Data urodzenia. No, jak? Podpiszesz czy nie? To jest twoja ostatnia szansa.
Nie. Strzelaj. No już, no. No strzelaj. Ty. No powiedz, żeby do mnie strzelił, ja już dłużej tego nie wytrzymam, no zrób to! Proszę cię!
Mówiłem, że to nie są metody. Jakieś idiotyczne śniadania, jakiś teatr. Co to jest? Burdel czy śledztwo?
This resulted in Interrogation being one of the longest shelved movies. The film wasn't released until the very end of communism in 1989, possibly already after the liberation.
A chyba nawet już po odzyskaniu wolności w roku 89. To, co było
The key to cinema of the preceding period was having developed a language to describe contemporary reality.
Języka dla pokazywania współczesności. O to było teraz najtrudniej. No nie można było pokazać.
This was now most difficult. It wasn't an option to depict the reality of martial law, but filmmakers attempted to address the most recent events using parabolas or allegories, narrative shortcuts.
Skrótu fabularnego. I to były najszczęśliwsze przykłady tego kina lat 80.
And these were the best examples of the cinema of the 1980s. Beginning with a film by Antoni Krause, started in 1981 and finished in 1982. This was often successful in that the authorities were not as totalitarian as one may have thought. The bans and limitations could be circumvented in one way or another.
to się nieoczekiwanie udawało. To znaczy ta władza nie była tak totalitarna, żeby się nie dało jej zakazów jakoś omijać. Z takim filmem była Prognoza pogody.
An example of such a film was Prognoza Pogody, The Weather Forecast by Antoni Krause, an old idea by Marek Nowakowski to tell the true story of an escape from a retirement home by a group of senior citizens. Having learned that due to the forecast of an extremely severe winter, the senior home management decided to bring in extra coffins, this whole group of seniors collectively decided to run away, just in case. Krause had the fantastic idea to cast the actors living in the actors' house in Skolimów as these seniors on the run. So their adventures overlapped. Those of the real-life retired actors in Krause's film were identical to the fictitious adventures of the protagonists of Nowakowski's novel.
Nałożyła się na fikcyjną przygodę bohaterów opowiadania Nowakowskiego w filmie Krausego, w którym zresztą debiutował.
Incidentally, the weather forecast marked the composing debut of Zbigniew Preisner, which helped provide this story with an excellent artistic feel. At this point, we should also mention Kobieta w kapeluszu, Woman in a Hat, a film by Stanisław Różewicz, which used the story of a young actress who can't seem to get her career off the ground, whose various hopes are crushed in Poland under martial law, to create another example of allegory. Sometimes a story from abroad would provide such allegorical substance, as was the case with the legendary documentary from the end of the 1980s, Andrzej Fidyk's Defilada. This journalistic piece about North Korea, allegedly filmed in goodwill, became an extremely popular, metonymic image of any country under dictatorial rule.
Metonimicznym właściwie wizerunkiem każdego kraju, w którym rządzi dyktatura.
Ukochany przywódca powiedział, że sztuka musi być podporządkowana polityce. Reżyser filmowy musi być ideologicznym nauczycielem grupy zdjęciowej. Ma odpowiadać za polityczno-ideologiczną moralność wszystkich współpracowników twórczych. W kapitalizmie reżyser jest tylko płatnym agentem, który służy na każde skinienie kapitalistom. W ustroju socjalistycznym natomiast reżyser jest niezależnym twórczym artystą, odpowiedzialnym tylko przed partią.
Najszczęśliwszym realizatorem tej formuły, właśnie takiej alegorii, która jest
The top person to implement this form of allegory, seen as an image of the ethical circumstances of mankind at the time, was Krzysztof Kieślowski. This was his decade. He first made the film Bez końca, No End, arguably the most sincere and most beautiful artistic piece on martial law. He used the means available to portray martial law, and the film was, surprisingly, released theatrically. In the second half of the decade, Kieślowski made his opus magnum, a 10-part television series known as Decalogue. The Decalogue, based on an idea by Krzysztof Piesiewicz, whom he befriended at the time. In fact, it was a total of 12 films, because 2 episodes of Decalogue, The Decalogue, the 5th and 6th episodes, Nie zabijaj, Thou shalt not kill, and Nie cudzołóż, Thou shalt not commit adultery, were released theatrically as Krótki film o zabijaniu, a short film about killing, and Krótki film o miłości, a short film about love, respectively. They were slightly different from the original. It would not be an overstatement to say they gained acclaim around the world that was without precedent. No Polish filmmaker before Kieślowski, or after for that matter, enjoyed similar acclaim. Over a few years, Kieślowski became a guru of European cinema, received across Europe with even more enthusiasm than he was in Poland. Decalogue, The Decalogue, traveled the world and became, in a sense, the film of the decade, the European film of the decade. extremely enlightening and providing food for thought to this day. These films are in no way a simple illustration of the Ten Commandments. They are open works that, stemming from various legal cases known to Piesiewicz from his experience as an attorney, served as entry points to reflections on ethics.
Otwierały takie pole refleksji etycznej.
Niech pan stanie. To tam. Dalej nie można przejechać.
I tak dalej bym nie pojechał.
Więc to chyba takie najważniejsze osiągnięcie filmowe.
This would probably be the top filmmaking accomplishment of the decade. But there were attempts at other methods as well. Some filmmakers tried, under these difficult circumstances, to continue the concept of the cinema of moral anxiety. For a year or two, an audience favorite among film debate clubs was Wiesław Saniewski's feature Nadzór, Custody, a film that seemed unwholesome, being in line with the poetics of the cinema of moral anxiety, portraying the realistic case of a woman imprisoned for embezzlement in the 1960s, who was sentenced to a ridiculously long time in prison, served time, and, while in prison, started becoming someone else, gaining awareness. We followed her over the course of a dozen years. Another example was Jerzy Domaracki's Planeta Krawiec, The Planet Taylor, about an elderly amateur astronomer, a late bloomer in terms of awareness. These were stories about people who, at a much older age than the protagonists of the films of the cinema of moral anxiety movement, gained awareness. This period was abundant in examples of stories of men and women gaining wisdom. Then there were new attempts at the grotesque trend in cinema. Several excellent films were made at this time by Piotr Szulkin, using the aesthetic he had developed earlier, bearing titles that came from the first words or sounds uttered by his young children at the time. First Obi, Oba, then Gaga, Chwała Bohaterom, Gaga, Glory to the Heroes. His Orwellian prophetic visions, often touching upon the terrors of life in society in the future, opened new possibilities in the field of sci-fi cinema. This period also marked the late debut by an extremely talented director, who had previously focused only on documentary films. Marek Koterski. His two films from the second half of the 1980s, his feature film Dom Wariatów, The House of Fools, followed by Życie wewnętrzne, Inner Life, was certainly a new voice in Polish cinema. Using a micro-observation of family, their gestures, expressions, seemingly insignificant behavior that in reality expressed frustration, lack of fulfillment in life, Koterski told stories that Polish audiences would identify with for years to come. Stories that also served as a new voice in this genre.
Co robisz?
Chyba się kiwa.
Nie kiwało się.
Nie szkodzi, mi nie przeszkadza.
Nie będzie się kiwać.
Już się nie kiwa.
Odłóż.
Mamo, naprawdę.
Nie będziesz się męczył. Mnie to denerwuje, jak się kiwa. Ten stół w kuchni też się kiwa.
Mamo.
Nie. No to nie. Zmienię ci talerzyk.
Yet the most common attitude among filmmakers that had any chance at being fruitful, since it was impossible to effectively portray present-day reality, was a return to the past, with various, more or less original in terms of visuals, visions of the past.
Rozmaite, mniej czy bardziej kreowane, oryginalne od strony obrazowej, wizje przeszłości. Tu bardzo dużo.
This period marked a significant number of excellent works in this area, starting with the great Andrzej Wajda himself.
Stan wojenny uniemożliwił pierwotny projekt realizacji.
The introduction of martial law hindered the production of his film Sprawa Dantona, The Danton Affair. Originally developed in 1981 and based on a play by Polish playwright Stanisława Przybyszewska, written in the late 1920s. Wajda had successfully staged this play at Teatr Powszechny, and it was his idea to make it into a film, in co-production with France. Ironically, martial law may have actually helped this case. Wajda first wanted to make the film on a low budget, together with the French, filming in Poland. But when it proved impossible to shoot in Poland, as any sort of mass crowds were out of the question, as in collecting such a large number of actors anywhere outdoors, the French co-producers chipped in and the film was made in France, in original settings. This story of the French Revolution of the late 18th century was filmed in France. And the fantastic acting duel between Wojciech Przoniak as Robespierre and Gérard Depardieu as Danton is one of the best such scenes in the history of Polish cinema.
Tu rêves du pouvoir?
Je n'ai pas en rêvé. Je l'ai. Le pouvoir, je l'ai, le vrai, le seul pouvoir, la rue. Parce que moi, la rue, je la comprends et elle me comprend. N'oublie jamais ça, n'oublie jamais.
Moi, je ne l'oublie pas. Toi, n'oublie pas de ton côté que pour faire enfin le bonheur de la rue, je ne reculerai devant rien.
Mais tu ne sais même pas ce que c'est que le peuple. Qu'est-ce que tu connais du peuple? Rien. Regarde-toi. Tu bois pas de vin, t'as les cheveux poudrés. À la vue d'une épée, tu t'évanouis. Et il paraît que t'as jamais baisé une femme, alors? Au nom de qui tu parles? Tu veux faire le bonheur des hommes et t'es même pas un homme. Ah! Tu veux que je te dise ce que c'est que le peuple? Tu veux venir faire un tour avec moi dans la rue? Oh. Excuse-moi. J'ai toujours été brutal et maladroit. Je me suis réveillé cette nuit et je me suis dit, mais qu'on nous sépare, toi et moi, mais qu'on nous prenne pour des ennemis. Mais ça n'a pas de sens, ça n'a aucun sens. Il faut arrêter. Arrêtez ça tout de suite.
Alors fais ce que je te demande.
Comment ça?
Georges, fais ce que je te demande, rallie-toi à nous.
Je suis parti à la campagne pour réfléchir et pour tout revoir depuis le début. Et je vais te dire, franchement, très franchement, je préfère être guillotiné que guillotineur.
De quoi parles-tu? Tu es complètement ivre.
Si tu t'obstines, Maxime, tu la vois cette tête? Tu vois cette tête? Tu la sens? Hein? Eh bien, ce sera toi qui seras obligé de la couper.
The French took this film very personally. To this day, it is regularly broadcast on French public television on the anniversary of the French Revolution, and has received all possible awards of merit from French President François Mitterrand. In Poland, it wasn't as warmly received, but it was also treated as an allegory of Poland's unfinished revolution. Later, Wajda's Kronika Wypadków Miłosnych, Chronicle of Amorous Accidents, based on a novel by Tadeusz Konwicki, could be treated as Wajda's manifesto. If our hopes have been temporarily thwarted, at least there is one place where Poles can still enjoy a bit of happiness. The land of our childhood, as stated in Pan Tadeusz. The return to this land of our childhood, a land shared, in a sense, by writer Tadeusz Konwicki, who played himself in the film, and director Andrzej Wajda. Both men had been born in 1926, in what was then northeastern Poland. They were thus able to discuss their childhood in similar tones. This served as a form of asylum for the imagination of the audience.
O, tu jest zdjęcie ojca.
Widzisz, zupełnie zwykła twarz, pełno takich na ulicy. Ja już go nie pamiętam. Czy był dobry, szlachetny, sympatyczny, co myślał, za czym tęsknił i kogo naprawdę kochał. Może ty potrafisz to przypomnieć?
Nigdy się nie zastanawiałem.
Kiedyś jeszcze zatęsknisz do ojca.
Dlaczego pan do nas przychodzi?
Czy ja w tobie nie budzę lęku, prawda? Może jestem takim duchem, który nikogo nie straszy, który sam siebie dręczy, szukając sensu w bezsensie. Cokolwiek bym ci teraz powiedział, nie zatrzymam ciebie i nie odwrócę twego losu.
Tadeusz Konwicki himself also had a few good years at this time, making his two final films, going against his earlier rule of avoiding adaptations of other people's work. But then the circumstances were rather special. First, an opportunity arose to adapt Czesław Miłosz's autobiographical novel Dolina Issy, the Issa Valley. And Konwicki took advantage of this opportunity. The film was shot in 1981, edited in 1982, and the result was a beautiful, poetic tale, filtered through Konwicki's own auteur imagination. A tale of a 20th century pilgrimage, a story of people who were forced to leave their homeland and wander the world after the fateful year 1939.
W mojej ojczyźnie, do której nie wrócę, jest takie leśne jezioro ogromne. Chmury szerokie, rozdarte, cudowne. Pamiętam, kiedy wzrok za siebie rzuca.
And then an even more exciting opportunity occurred to Konwicki. A film that he made at the very end of the communist period in Poland. A film adaptation of Dziady by Adam Mickiewicz, the most beautiful text ever written in Polish. According to some, these verses are on a par with Kochanowski's Treny, but I believe this to be the single most important of Polish works. Konwicki succeeded in finding the right film form for it, inspired by Mickiewicz himself, who had commented on Dziady, stating that there are two jobs for anyone willing to adapt this work. First, to see that the various plots set throughout the different parts of the piece, different in the second part, the fourth, the third, that they could be turned into a single story. A single, continuous tale that lasts a single day. And at the same time, it lasts several hundred years, not unlike a myth. Konwicki set this story in a time frame lasting from the first part of the 19th century, when it had been written, to the present day. All Souls' Day gains a universal, mythical sense. Secondly, there is a character that unites the three parts, played by Gustav Holoubek, acting as part Gustav, part Konrad, part Gustav Konrad, part Holoubek himself, the actor who had played in Dejmek's staging of Dziady, part Konwicki, part Mickiewicz, who imagines himself back in the city of his youth, while essentially being a member of the Polish intelligentsia, or artist, a model for reflecting and contemplating Poland's fate by the audience.
Ja i ojczyzna to jedno. Nazywam się Milion, bo za miliony kocham i cierpię katusze. Patrzę na ojczyznę biedną, jak syn na ojca wplecionego w koło. Czuję całego cierpienia narodu, jak matka czuje w łonie bolę swego plodu. Cierpię, szaleję, a ty mądrze i wesoło zawsze rządzisz. Zawsze sądzisz. Mówią, że ty nie błądzisz.
Inne takie powroty do przeszłości.
Other unexpected returns to the past include Tadeusz Chmielewski's adaptation of Wierna Rzeka, The Faithful River, by Stefan Żeromski, which was also shelved for a good few years. The first portrayal of an anti-Russian uprising where Russians speak Russian, where there are changes in the social strata, where the archetypical scenes in Polish history are finally translated to the screen, not just in pre-war cinema, but at last in post-war cinema of the 1980s.
Барышня, вы кто?
Krewna gospodarzy domu.
А хозяева где?
Pana Rudeckiego zabrali dragoni. Żona pojechała starać się o jego zwolnienie.
Кто здесь еще есть, кроме вас?
Tylko stary służący. Gotuje tutaj.
Нам сказали, что вы прячете у себя повстанца. Где он?
We dworze poza mną i kucharzem nie ma nikogo.
Я вам советую признаться и показать, где он прячется. Я человек старый, без вины наказывать не люблю.
Magnat, The Magnate by Philip Bayon. Not a literary adaptation, but rather the fruit of Bayon's own imagination. He weaves the story of a German aristocratic house, the Van Pless family, owners of Pszczyna in this artistic work set in the first half of the 20th century. The film itself is, in fact, a history of the first half of the century.
Der Skanderkaiser mit kaiserlicher Entsatzung.
Es war auch eine kaiserliche Jagd. Fürst, Sie haben so viele Überraschungen vorbereitet und für ein so prachtvolles Finale gesorgt. Ich wusste gar nicht, dass Sie so viel Zeug zum Jäger haben. So eine Gabe sollte man nicht verkümmern lassen. Für dies männliche Abenteuer will ich mich erkenntlich zeigen. Fürst, möchtest du Jägermeister am Hofe sein? Oder willst du lieber eine Botschaft? In London vielleicht. Wie deine Frau es sich wünscht, Fürst.
Ich bin sehr stolz auf die mir erwiesene Ehre. Mein Wunsch wäre, Eurer Majestät zu dienen als Jägermeister am Hofe.
And finally, Osteria by Jerzy Kawalerovich, based on a novel by Julian Strijkowski. Based on the history of the Jews, life in a shtetl and pogroms in the period before the First World War, this is an epic tale of the history of Polish Jews, one that was long in the making.
Jest to właściwie taki epos o historii polskich Żydów, do którego polska kinematografia przygotowywała się przez wiele lat. Wreszcie jest grupa bardzo ciekawych takich filmów osobnych.
Finally, there is a group of very interesting, if separate, films made in this period. The captivating late works of Wojciech Has, most notably his Nieciekawa Historia, a boring story. Made instead of his opus magnum, which Has attempted in the early 1980s, based on an original screenplay by Jadwiga Kukuczanka. It was supposed to be a film called Osioł grający na lirze, a lyre playing donkey. And it was to be a truly exceptional work, one without precedent in the history of world cinema. Unfortunately, Has never got the chance to make it. Everything was arranged, but this is the perfect example of the sins of martial law against culture. This meticulously organized international co-production with Orson Welles cast as God Catherine Deneuve as the Holy Virgin, and that's just part of the cast, with music arranged for the pan flute, this international co-production. Everything ultimately crashed and burned as a result of Polish artists being refused permission to travel abroad then, in early 1982, when this production was in the works.
Na początku 1982 roku, kiedy ta produkcja była przygotowana. Ale I tacy osobni polscy...
There were other Polish auteurs who made several significant films at this time. A dozen or so after his Żywot Mateusza, The Life of Matthew, Witold Leszczyński made Siekierezada, Aksiliad, based on the prose of Edward Stachura. Leszek Wosiewicz made his feature debut, a sort of non-debut debut, because he had made a few films before. But his first significant work, a treatise on the philosophy of history, was Kornblumenblau, which tells the story of a Polish pianist who finds himself in Auschwitz.
Polskiego pianisty, który znalazł się w obozie koncentracyjnym Auschwitz, no taką wyciągającą konsekwencje.
Stemming from the prose of Borowski, this tale is an allegory of what totalitarian rule does to a man.
Co się dzieje z człowiekiem w totalitaryzmie.
Cisza! Zabrać tego bydlaka. Lore, 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 lore. Lore, 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 lore.
We should also mention mainstream cinema, which, in various genres, had its own golden age at this time, as is often the case in dire times. Starting with comedy, the hit of the decade, or the equivalent of the world success of Decalogue, the Decalogue in terms of art house cinema. In mainstream cinema, this blockbuster was Sex Misja, Sex Mission, a comedy by Juliusz Machulski, based on an original screenplay developed before the introduction of martial law, but completed in the most difficult time. This was an Orwellian anti-utopia, set in a country ruled by women, starring Jerzy Sztur and Olgierd Łukasiewicz.
Jerzy Sztur I Olgierd Łukasiewicz w rolach, jak o nim powiedzieć, o tej postaci Sztura, prostego człowieka.
Jerzy Sztur played a simple Polish man, so to speak, a straight-shooting, clever guy, while Olgierd Łukasiewicz played a neurasthenic intellectual. The two complement each other, together serving as, if we were to use terminology from Polish mythology, a new incarnation of the ancient Polish dream from the days of Krasiński. The long-awaited miracle of the gentry and the people uniting. In this way, the audience of Sex Misja, Sex Mission, was able to enjoy the fulfillment of this Polish myth, if only in the realm of imagination.
Historia postępu to historia mężczyzn. Temu nie możecie zaprzeczyć. Wszyscy wielcy uczeni, ojcowie postępu, humaniści, wynalazcy byli mężczyznami i dlatego...
Niby którzy? Konkretnie, nazwiska.
No choćby Kopernik!
To kłamstwo! Kopernik była kobietą!
Co? No to Einstein!
Einstein też była kobietą!
A może Curie Skłodowska też? To akurat nie najlepszy przykład.
Albo mnie zmyliły. Przepraszam.
A jeśli dodać do tego, że...
And if we add the fact that Machulski's feature debut, Vabank, was released in 1982, an attempt at retro, mixing several genres with a brilliant cast, including the director's own father, Jan Machulski, as the trumpet-playing Kwinto, then Machulski was considered the king of the season, or in fact of half a decade. Vabank, then Sex Misja, Sex Mission, then Vabank 2, Vabank 2, he addressed all the needs of the audience as far as mainstream cinema was concerned. In terms of mainstream, another notable example is the television series Alternatywy 4, a late work by Stanisław Bareja, whose untimely death in the mid-1980s prevented him from seeing freedom or producing new theatrical films. But his last two television series, the aforementioned Alternatywy 4 a Zmiennicy, served as the crowning glory of his career as a comedy director. As far as other genres were concerned, often unexpected genres for Polish cinema, it was a good decade. For starters, in terms of children's movies, the decade brought an entire series of films featuring Pan Kleks, Mr. Blot, an adaptation of a novel by Jan Brzechwa called Akademia Pana Kleksa, Mr. Blot's Academy. Written during the war, published after the war, beautifully revived as a children's musical by Krzysztof Gradowski, starring Piotr Frączewski as the eponymous Mr. Blot. Polish cinema also noted some success in the field of horror movies and gained quite a following. Marek Piestrak had a significant fan base as the director of the historic horror Wilczyca, The Wolf, as did Jacek Koprowicz, director of Medium. According to American theorists, the essence or source of postmodernism is nostalgia and calling upon the past. There have been quite a few examples of this in Polish cinema, including Yesterday, the award-winning feature debut from Radosław Piwowarski. The story of a group of high school students in early 1960s Poland who start a Beatles cover band, calling themselves Ringo, John, etc. And they play the Beatles' music as best as they can. This was one of the films that received international acclaim, winning the Golden Shell Award at the San Sebastian Film Festival. In fact, Polish films at this time received quite a few unexpected international awards. The first Polish Golden Lion winner in Venice was Krzysztof Zanussi's Rok Spokojnego Słońca, A Year of the Quiet Sun. The end of the decade brought a new group of films that foreshadowed a new trend in the history of Polish cinema. They were prematurely referred to as the martial law generation. These were graduates of the Katowice Film School, the radio and television department of the University of Silesia. Another interesting piece of the history of Polish cinema, this school was established as a center for educating directors whose purpose was to implement the propaganda of the age of Gierek. But it turned out to be the forging ground of oppositionist directors, at least since Edward Zajíček took over as dean in the late 1970s. Directors who couldn't truly spread their wings until the 1980s, reliving their experience from the period of martial law. Films such as Waldemar Krzystek's Ostatni Prom, The Last Ferry, Maciej Dejcer's 300 mil do nieba, 300 Miles to Heaven, Magdalena Łazarkiewicz's Ostatni Dzwonek, The Last School Bell, These were all films by graduates of the Katowice Film School. They were all released at the same time in 1989, bringing hope for a new light on Polish cinema. But, as is usually the case, reality proved more complicated. The careers of these filmmakers did not necessarily develop in the direction of purely autobiographical forms of expression, as the aforementioned films would suggest.